Hello everyone, and welcome back. We trust the police to stand between us and the chaos, to make sense of the things we can't face. But what happens when the officers themselves walk into a scene that logic can't explain? Tonight, we're opening 5 case files that defy procedure. From a quiet suburban home where a family lived among the dead, to an interrogation room with a blood-soaked suspect who claims he was asleep, to a Nevada highway where the paperwork is more haunting than the wreckage. These are the shifts that follow you home. Before you get too cozy, do me a favor. Check your doors, maybe dim the lights. And if you enjoy the escape I bring you, hit that like button. It tells YouTube you want more of these stories in your feed. Let me know in the comments. What time is it where you are right now? It's always midnight somewhere. Now, close your eyes and let's dispatch the units. Story 1. The smell hit us before we even got to the front door. I'm Officer Marcus Sullivan, and I've been with the Rockford Police Department for 9 years. Worked patrol for 5, worked vice for 2, worked community outreach for another year before going back to patrol. I've seen overdoses in public restrooms, domestic violence scenes where the walls tell stories nobody wants to hear, suicides that haunt me on quiet nights. I thought I'd seen everything a suburban neighborhood could throw at me. Every variation of human tragedy that can unfold behind white picket fences and 2-car garages. I was wrong. It was a Thursday afternoon in late September when we got the call. Dispatch sent it through around 2 p.m. Neighbors at 447 Maple Ridge Lane, reporting a foul odor coming from the Patterson residence. Had been smelling it for about a week. Thought maybe it was a dead animal in the walls or a backed-up sewer line, but it kept getting worse. Mrs. Dorothy Klein from next door finally called it in. Said she hadn't seen the family in what felt like months, maybe longer. Said their mail was piling up in the box, overflowing onto the porch, but then one day it wasn't. Someone was collecting it, someone was sorting through it, but she never saw who. I responded with my partner, Officer Brooklyn Hayes. We'd been riding together for 3 years. Good cop, thorough, didn't rattle easy. She had a background in social work before joining the force, which made her better at reading situations than most. We pulled up to a nice 2-story colonial with white siding and black shutters, manicured lawn, recently mowed. The kind of house you see in home improvement commercials or those real estate listings that make you believe in the American dream. Everything looked perfect from the outside. There were Halloween decorations already up even though it was barely October. Fake cobwebs stretched across the bushes, a smiling scarecrow sitting on the porch in a rocking chair. Orange, lights strung along the railing that probably lit up at night to look festive and welcoming. The smell was immediate when we stepped out of the cruiser. Sweet and chemical and wrong all at once. Not the usual decomp smell I've encountered at death scenes. I've smelled that plenty of times. This was different, layered, like someone had tried to cover up death with perfume and furniture polish and air freshener, like they'd been fighting a losing battle against decay for a long time. We knocked on the front door. No answer. Knocked again, louder, announced ourselves. Police, open up. Nothing. Brooklyn checked the windows on the left side of the house while I tried the door. Locked. I looked through the front window, cupping my hands against the glass to block out the glare. The living room looked normal. Actually, more than normal. It looked perfect. A beige couch with throw pillows arranged just so. A coffee table with magazines fanned out in a neat display. A TV mounted on the wall. Everything clean, everything in place. Nothing out of order, nothing to suggest anything was wrong. Mrs. Klein came out of her house, standing on her porch, wringing her hands. "Is everything okay?" she called over. "We're checking it out, ma'am," I said. "When was the last time you actually saw the family?" She thought about it. "Months," she said. "Maybe June? July? They used to wave when they drove past. The kids played in the yard, but then they just stopped coming out. I thought maybe they went on vacation, but their cars are still here, both of them in the garage." We went around back. The gate to the backyard was unlocked, swinging slightly in the breeze. The smell was stronger here, concentrated. We found the back door, which had a window set into it. I looked inside, shining my flashlight through the glass even though it was daytime. The beam cut through the dim interior. That's when I saw them. The family was sitting at the dining room table. 4 of them, 2 adults, 2 children, all perfectly still, arranged like they were posing for a portrait. All dressed like they were going to church in 1955. The father in a dark suit and tie, his posture straight. The mother in a floral dress with her hair done up in an elaborate style that must have taken hours. The boy, maybe 10 years old, in slacks and a sweater vest. The girl, younger, maybe 7, in a white dress with a ribbon in her hair. Their faces were painted. Not with makeup, with actual paint, thick, layered, rosy cheeks, bright red lips, perfect circles of blush, like porcelain dolls. Like someone had tried to make them look alive and healthy, but had crossed some line into the uncanny valley where they looked less human and more like props. "Brooklyn," I said quietly. My voice felt too loud in the stillness. She came over, looked through the window, and I heard her breath catch in her throat. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Call it in," I said. "We're going in." She radioed for backup while I tried the back door. Unlocked. It swung open with a long, slow creak like something from a horror movie, and that smell rolled out in a wave that nearly knocked me back. Chemical flowers trying to mask something organic and wrong. Old meat left too long, dust that had settled over everything, and underneath it all, something else I couldn't identify, something that made my skin crawl. We entered with our weapons drawn, moving slowly, announcing ourselves again. "Police. Is anyone home? We have reports of a disturbance." Our voices echoed through the house, bouncing off walls that didn't answer back. The dining room was directly to our left through an arched doorway. We approached slowly, carefully, watching for any movement. The family didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. The stillness was absolute. They were dead, very dead, but arranged with such care it was disturbing. Positioned like actors in a play. The father had his hands folded on the table in front of him, fingers laced together. The mother's hands were in her lap, resting gently on the napkin she'd spread there. The boy was holding a fork in his right hand, lifted halfway to his mouth like he'd been frozen mid-bite. The girl had a napkin spread across her lap, her hands folded on top of it, her head tilted slightly as if she'd been listening to someone speak. And in front of them on the table was a meal, a full meal. Roast chicken in the center, golden brown and rotted. Mashed potatoes in a serving bowl, covered in fuzzy mold. Green beans arranged on a platter, shriveled and black. Dinner rolls in a basket, hard as stone. All of it set out like someone had just served dinner, like they were about to eat. But everything was decayed, spoiled, ancient. Brooklyn covered her mouth and nose with her hand. "Jesus, how long have they been like this?" I didn't answer. I was looking at their faces, at the care someone had taken. The paint was thick, layered, applied multiple times. The mother's lipstick was perfect, a bright red that would have looked garish on a living person. The father's skin had been powdered to hide the gray pallor underneath. The children's cheeks were painted bright pink, their eyes carefully closed, their expressions serene. Someone had positioned their faces, tilted their heads, arranged them to look peaceful, to look like they were sleeping. Except they weren't sleeping. Their skin was gray underneath the makeup, sunken in places, preserved somehow, chemically treated, but clearly decomposed, clearly dead for a very long time. "Clear the house," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We moved through the first floor, room by room. The kitchen was spotless, dishes put away, counters wiped down, everything in its place. The living room untouched, magazines from months ago still fanned out on the coffee table. A hallway led to a bathroom and a small office. Everything looked normal. No signs of struggle, no blood, no overturned furniture. Nothing to indicate violence or panic or anything that would explain what we'd found in the dining room. We went upstairs, our footsteps creaking on the old wood. 4 bedrooms. Master bedroom at the end of the hall, 2 kids' rooms on the right, and a guest room on the left. All of them clean. Beds made with hospital corners, clothes folded in dressers, shoes lined up in closets. Like a showroom. Like a display in a furniture store where everything is perfect because no one actually lives there. In the master bedroom, I found photographs on the dresser. The family, alive and smiling in various poses. Beach vacation, Christmas morning, birthday party. I picked one up carefully with my gloved hand. It showed all 4 of them at what looked like a summer barbecue. The father had his arm around the mother. The kids were holding sparklers. Everyone was laughing. There was a date written on the back in blue ink. July 4th, 2020. 4 years ago. Over 4 years ago. I set the photo down and looked at the others. The family looked happy, normal. The father's name, according to a plaque on the desk, was Vincent Patterson, high school teacher based on the papers I found. The mother was Natalie, real estate agent from the business cards in her nightstand. The kids were Ethan and Claire. They'd been a real family, a normal family. And now they were downstairs, dressed up like dolls, sitting at a table with rotted food. Backup arrived. We heard the sirens, saw the lights through the windows. Sergeant Dakota Marshall showed up with 2 more units and a detective named Preston Ward. We briefed them outside on the front lawn while neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, phones out, filming everything. Preston went in first, spent about 5 minutes inside, then came out looking pale despite his 20 years on the force. "Get the coroner," he said, his voice tight. "Get forensics, get everyone, and somebody get me the property records for this address. I want to know everything about this family. We secured the scene with..." Yellow tape, established a perimeter, kept the neighbors back. Mrs. Klein was crying now, her husband holding her. She kept saying she should have checked sooner, should have known something was wrong, should have called weeks ago when she first noticed the smell. But how could she have known? How could anyone have imagined this? The forensics team arrived within the hour. They photographed everything from every angle, documented the bodies, the table setting, the room, the entire house. The coroner, an older man named Gerald Henderson with gray hair and tired eyes, took one look at the family and shook his head slowly. "These people have been dead for years," he said quietly. "At least 2, possibly longer. Someone's been preserving them. I can smell the embalming fluid from here. Formaldehyde. This wasn't natural decomposition. This was intentional. Someone did this on purpose. Someone wanted them to stay like this. But the real kicker, the thing that made my blood run cold, came when Detective Ward checked the mail. There was a stack of it on the kitchen counter, sorted into neat piles. Bills, catalogs, letters, magazines, all addressed to the Patterson family, all opened carefully, some with handwritten notes in the margins. The postmark on the top envelope was from yesterday, Tuesday, September the 23rd, 2024. I picked it up with gloved hands, turned it over. It was a credit card statement for Vincent Patterson. The envelope had been opened carefully along the seam with a letter opener, not torn. Inside, the statement showed charges from the last month, groceries from the local supermarket, gas from the station on Route 9, utility payments, all normal, all recent. Someone had been living here, living with them, with the bodies, paying their bills with their credit cards, opening their mail, maintaining the house, keeping up appearances, acting like everything was normal, acting like they were a family. We found more evidence as we searched. Fresh food in the refrigerator that hadn't expired. Milk with a sell-by date 3 days away. Bread on the counter, soft, only a few days old. Coffee in the maker from this morning, still slightly warm when I touched the pot. Dishes in the sink that had been washed and left to dry. Whoever had been here had left recently. Very recently. Maybe when they heard us knocking. Maybe when they saw the police cruiser pull up. Maybe they'd been watching from somewhere and slipped out the back while we were checking the front. Preston organized a full search. We went through every room again, every closet, every drawer, looking for any clue about who had been living here. That's when Brooklyn found the journal. It was in the guest bedroom, tucked under the mattress near the headboard. A spiral notebook with a floral cover, the kind you can buy at any drugstore. The pages were filled with handwriting in neat, careful cursive, almost childlike in its precision. I started reading and my stomach turned. The entries were dated. They went back almost exactly 2 years. The first one was dated October 3rd, 2022. The handwriting was excited, happy, almost manic. October 3rd, 2022. Found them today. They're perfect. They're finally perfect. They won't leave me now. They won't send me away. They won't die and abandon me. We're going to be a real family. The family I was always supposed to have. The entries continued, dated every single day for 2 years. Daily logs of life with the Patterson family. Detailed accounts of meals prepared, conversations imagined, activities shared. Reading like a diary of domestic life, except the other people in the house were corpses. October 8th, 2022. Made pancakes for breakfast. Vincent likes his with extra syrup. Natalie prefers hers plain. The children were so well behaved at the table today. November 15th, 2022. Watched a movie together tonight. A nice family film. Everyone sat on the couch. Claire sat next to me. She's such a sweet girl. She let me brush her hair afterward. January 20th, 2023. Vincent's birthday today. I made a cake. Chocolate, his favorite. We all sang happy birthday. He looked so happy. The delusion was complete. Total. Whoever wrote this genuinely believed they were living with a functioning family. Or maybe they knew the truth and couldn't face it, so they created this elaborate fantasy. The entries got stranger as time went on. More maintenance-focused, more focused on keeping up appearances. May 15th, 2023. Claire's hair was coming loose today. I fixed it, brushed it out completely and pinned it back with her favorite clips. She looks so pretty now. Ethan needed a new shirt. The old one was getting stained and I couldn't get it clean anymore. I found a nice one in his closet, blue. Matches his eyes. He looks so handsome. August 2nd, 2023. Vincent's hand fell off the table during dinner. The wrist joint is getting weak. I put it back in place and positioned his arm more carefully. He's still such a good father. Still sits at the head of the table every night, watching over us. Natalie made pot roast today. She always makes pot roast on Tuesdays. It's tradition. Except Natalie didn't make anything. Natalie was dead. Natalie had been dead for years. Whoever wrote this was cooking meals and setting them out for corpses, living in a complete fantasy world. The last entry was from just 3 days ago. September 24th, 2024. The neighbors are asking questions again. I see them looking at the house more and more often. Mrs. Klein keeps walking past, slowing down, staring at the windows. She came to the door yesterday, but I didn't answer. They're going to ruin everything. They're going to take my family away from me again. I won't let them. I'll move us if I have to. We'll go somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find us. Somewhere we can be together forever. There was no signature. No name anywhere in the journal. Just page after page of entries about living with corpses like they were alive. About maintaining an illusion that no sane person could believe. Preston called for a psychological profile. Put out a request to missing persons databases. Someone had been here for 2 years, living with these bodies, and we had no idea who they were. That's when Brooklyn called me from the backyard. Her voice came through on the radio, tight and controlled, but I could hear the fear underneath. Marcus, you need to see this. The playhouse. I went outside. She was standing by a small wooden structure in the corner of the yard, a children's playhouse, the kind parents buy from catalogs. It had a door, 2 windows, a little porch, painted yellow with white trim. The door was standing open, swaying slightly in the breeze. Inside, we found evidence of habitation, a sleeping bag rolled up in the corner, a battery-powered camping lantern, empty food wrappers from convenience stores, plastic water bottles, a small camping stove. This is where they'd been sleeping. This is where they'd been living when they weren't inside the house with the family. But there was more. The walls were covered with photographs. Dozens of them, maybe 100, taped up in overlapping layers. All of the Patterson family. Professional portraits from photo studios, candid shots from holidays and birthdays, pictures from vacations and school events. Some of them looked like they'd been taken from albums in the house. Others looked like they'd been printed from social media, from Facebook or Instagram, and in every single one, someone had drawn on the photograph with permanent marker. A crude stick figure outline of a person added to each image. Sometimes the figure stood next to Natalie. Sometimes it was positioned between the children. Sometimes it sat in empty chairs or stood in the background, always smiling, always part of the family, always included. There was something else in the playhouse. A small cardboard box pushed into the back corner. I pulled it out, opened the flaps. Inside were identification cards, driver's licenses, all different, all obviously fake, printed on a home computer. The names on the cards changed, different first names, different last names, different addresses. But the photo was always the same, a face I didn't recognize. Pale skin, almost white, thin features, dark hair hanging limp around a gaunt face, eyes too wide, too intense, staring directly at the camera. We ran the photo through facial recognition. It took 2 hours, but we got a hit. Name, Margot Louise Brennan. Age 34, last. Known address, a long-term psychiatric facility in Montana. She'd been committed there in 2019 after a severe breakdown. The file said she had been diagnosed with severe delusional disorder and paranoid schizophrenia. She believed she was adopted, believed her real biological family was out there somewhere waiting for her, looking for her. She'd tried multiple times to find them, showing up at random houses, claiming the people inside were her parents. She'd escaped from the facility in August 2022, just walked away during a supervised outdoor activity. Never found, assumed to have left the state. The timeline matched perfectly. She'd escaped in August 2022, and the journal entries started in October 2022. 2 months to make her way from Montana to here. 2 months to find the Pattersons. We still don't know how she found them specifically. Maybe she'd been watching houses in nice neighborhoods, looking for the right family. Maybe she'd been following obituaries or police reports. Maybe she'd broken in intending to rob the place and found them already dead. And something in her broken mind saw an opportunity. The coroner's final report confirmed what we'd suspected. The Patterson family had all died from carbon monoxide poisoning. A faulty furnace, a carbon monoxide leak, a quiet death in their sleep. They died in winter, probably January or February of 2022, 2.5 years ago. The house had been sealed up, cold weather keeping the smell down. And then Margot had found them. She'd preserved them with chemicals she must have stolen or bought, positioned them, dressed them in clothes from their own closets, painted their faces, arranged them at the table, created the family she'd always wanted, the family that would never leave her, never abandon her, never die and break her heart. We put out an alert for Margot Louise Brennan. Statewide manhunt, federal involvement because she'd crossed state lines as an escaped mental patient. Her photo went out to every law enforcement agency in the region. But we haven't found her. It's been 6 weeks now, and there's been no sign of her anywhere. 3 weeks after we cleared the scene, I drove past the house again. It was empty by then, seized by the county, pending investigation and eventual sale. The Halloween decorations were still up because no one had bothered to take them down. The scarecrow still sat in the rocking chair on the porch, still smiling its painted smile. And as I slowed down, something made me look up at the second floor. There was a figure in the upstairs window. Just for a second, thin, pale, watching me with those 2 wide eyes. I slammed on the brakes, grabbed my radio. "Dispatch, I need units at 447 Maple Ridge Lane. Possible intruder, possible sighting of our suspect." Units responded within minutes. 4 cars, 8 officers. They searched that house top to bottom, checked every room, every closet, every crawl space, checked the attic, the basement, the garage, found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no footprints in the dust that had settled, no evidence anyone had been inside since we'd sealed it. But I know what I saw. And when the responding officers checked the dining room one more time before leaving, they found something that made everyone go quiet. A sixth chair had been pulled up to the table. When we'd processed the scene, when we'd photographed everything, there had been 5 chairs, 2 adults, 2 children, and 1 empty chair pushed against the wall. 5 chairs total. We had photographs proving it. Time-stamped photographs from the forensics team, but now there were 6 chairs arranged around the table. The new one was smaller, child-sized, and sitting on the seat was a doll. Not a child's toy. A ventriloquist dummy, old and cracked, the kind from the 1950s or earlier. It was dressed in a little suit with a bow tie. Its wooden face had been freshly painted. Rosy cheeks, red lips, bright circles of blush, just like the Pattersons. No one could explain how it got there. The house had been locked, all entry points sealed with police tape, monitored by the county. No one should have been able to get in. But someone had, or something had. I don't work that neighborhood anymore. I put in for a transfer the next week, got assigned to the North District. Different streets, different calls, different houses. I told my sergeant it was for personal reasons and he didn't push. But sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that house. I think about Margot Louise Brennan, wherever she is now. I wonder what she's doing. If she's found another family. If she's sitting at another table somewhere in another suburban house, pretending everything is normal. And I think about that dummy, about its painted smile and its glass eyes, about the 6th chair that appeared out of nowhere in a locked, sealed house. Because here's the thing that keeps me awake. The thing I haven't told anyone except Brooklyn, and she doesn't want to talk about it. When forensics finally did a full historical search of the property, going through old county records and newspaper archives, they found something in the basement, hidden in a crawl space behind the water heater. Old newspapers from the 1950s, bundled and stacked, yellow with age. And in one of them, buried in the local news section, they found an article about the previous owners of 447 Maple Ridge Lane. A family of 5 had lived there from 1952 to 1958. The Thornton family, parents and 3 children. All 5 of them died in a house fire in September 1958. Arson, the article said. Someone had set it deliberately. The family was found in the dining room. They'd been trying to escape. The article listed the victims' names: mother, father, 2 sons, and the youngest child, a daughter. Her name was Margot. She was 6 years old. The article included a photograph from the funeral, a school picture of a little girl with dark hair and wide eyes, pale skin, a painted smile that looked wrong even in the grainy old photograph. The same face from the IDs we found in the playhouse. The same face that stared at me from that upstairs window. I don't know what we found in that house. I don't know who or what Margot Brennan really is. If she's a woman who escaped from an institution in Montana, or something that's been in that house since 1958. Something that died in a fire but never left. Something that's been waiting all these years for the right family to come along. All I know is the house is still standing, still empty according to the county records. And every time I have to drive past it, which I try to avoid but sometimes can't, I count the windows on the 2nd floor, count the shadows behind the glass. And sometimes, when the light is just right and the street is quiet, I see 6 shadows in the dining room window. 6 figures sitting around a table that shouldn't have anyone at it at all. Story 2. I've been a detective with the Albuquerque Police Department for 17 years. I've seen a lot in that time. Murders that made sense and murders that didn't. Confessions that came easy and confessions that had to be dragged out word by word. But what happened in interview room 3 on March 8th, 2025, that's something I still can't explain. My name's Derek Sloan. Homicide. That morning started like any other. I was at my desk, working through case files, drinking bad coffee, when the desk sergeant called up. Said we had a walk-in. Guy covered in blood, carrying a knife, asking for help. I headed down to the lobby, half expecting some kind of setup or prank. But when I saw him, I knew it wasn't fake. The man standing there was maybe 30 years old, average height, brown hair matted with sweat and something darker. His clothes were soaked through with blood. Not his blood. Too much of it, and he was holding a kitchen knife, blade down, like he'd forgotten it was in his hand. His name was Brett Crosby. He looked terrified. Not the fake terror you see from people trying to sell a story. Real terror. The kind that makes someone's pupils dilate and their hands shake so hard they can barely stand still. I approached slowly, hand near my weapon. "Brett, I'm Detective Sloan. I need you to put that knife down for me." He looked at the knife like he was seeing it for the first time. His face went pale, paler. "I don't know why I have this. I don't remember. Put it down, Brett." Slowly, on the floor. He did. Set it down carefully, like it might break. Then he looked at his hands. They were covered in blood. Crusted under his fingernails, smeared up his forearms. "I woke up like this," he said. His voice was shaking. "I was in my apartment, in my bed. And I was like this, covered in this. I don't know what happened. I don't remember anything. We cuffed him, standard procedure. Took him to an interview room while forensics bagged the knife in his clothes. I had him put on a prison jumpsuit and got him some water. Then I sat across from him at that metal table and started asking questions. Tell me about last night, Brett. What do you remember?" He rubbed his face. His hands were still shaking even though we'd cleaned most of the blood off. "I went to bed around 10 p.m. I'd had a normal day. Worked from home. I'm a software developer. Made dinner, watched some TV, went to sleep. That's it. That's all I remember until I woke up this morning." "And when you woke up?" "I was in my bed. It was just getting light outside, maybe 6 a.m. And I looked down and saw the blood, all over me, all over my sheets. And the knife was on my nightstand. I freaked out. I didn't know what to do. So I came here. Do you live alone?" "Yes. Apartment in the Northeast Heights." "Do you have a history of sleepwalking?" "No, never." "Do you take any medications? Sleep aids, anything like that?" He hesitated. "I take Ambien sometimes, for insomnia. I've had trouble sleeping the last few months. Stress from work." That word. Ambien. I'd heard about cases like this. People doing things in their sleep on that medication, driving cars, making food, even violent acts they couldn't remember. But this seemed extreme. "Did you take Ambien last night?" "I think so." "Yeah, I did. Around 9 p.m. I left him in the interview room with a uniformed officer watching through the glass. Went to make some calls. First to the crime lab to fast-track the blood work on the knife and Brett's clothes. Second to check if there were any missing persons reports filed overnight. Any bodies found? Any calls about disturbances in the Northeast Heights? Nothing. No reports at all. That should have been good news, but it made me uneasy. If Brett had killed someone, where was the victim? Where was the crime scene? How did he get back to his apartment with no one seeing him? Albuquerque's a big city, but at that hour, someone usually sees something. I ran his background. Clean. No arrests, no warrants, no history of violence. Worked for a tech company doing cybersecurity, paid his rent on time, no red flags anywhere. The blood work came back 3 hours later. The blood on Brett wasn't his. It was type O negative. Brett was a positive. The DNA would take longer, but we had confirmation. He'd been in contact with someone else's blood. A lot of it. I went back to the interview room. Brett was sitting with his head in his hands. He looked up when I walked in. "Did you find out whose blood it is?" "We're working on that." "Brett, I need you to think harder. Is there anyone you might have had contact with last night? Anyone who might have come to your apartment?" "No, I was alone. I'm always alone. I haven't even been dating. I just work and sleep, and that's it. Have you had any strange experiences recently? Blackouts? Lost time?" "No, nothing like that. I mean, sometimes I feel like I lose track of time when I'm coding, but that's normal." let's just focus. This is different. I woke up covered in blood and I have no idea why. I watched him, studied his body language, his eye movements, his tone. Everything about him read as genuine, scared, confused, not deceptive. Then something changed. Brett's head started to nod forward, just slightly, like he was getting drowsy. "Detective, I'm sorry. I'm really tired suddenly. I know that sounds crazy, but I can barely keep my eyes open." It had been about 4 hours since he'd walked into the station. Stress, adrenaline crash, that could explain it. "When did you last sleep?" "I mean, really sleep? Last night, I guess. But I don't know if it was real sleep. I don't know what I was doing." His eyes were closing. "Brett, stay with me. I need you to answer more questions." He tried. I could see him fighting it. But his head dropped forward again, and within 30 seconds he was out. Asleep in the chair, hands cuffed in front of him resting on the table. I was about to wake him up when he sat up. Not gradually. Not like someone stirring from sleep. He sat bolt upright, spine straight, head level. But his eyes stayed closed. "Brett?" No response. His breathing was steady, deep. He was still asleep. "Brett, can you hear me?" Then he spoke. But it wasn't his voice. I mean, it came from his mouth. It used his vocal cords, but the sound was wrong. Flat, monotone, digital sounding, like it was being run through a vocoder or text-to-speech software. And it wasn't English. Not at first. It was coordinates. 35.2847 north, 106.6649 west, 35.2847 north, 106.6649 west. The voice repeated it 3 times. Exact same inflection, exact same rhythm. Then Brett slumped forward, head hitting the table, and started snoring. Normal sleep. I called in my partner, Jenna Murdoch. She'd been working a different case, but I needed a witness for this. Needed someone else to see it in case it happened again. Jenna and I woke Brett up, gently. He blinked, looked around, confused. "What happened?" "You fell asleep." "Do you remember saying anything? Anything?" "No, I don't remember falling asleep." "What did I say?" "You gave coordinates. Specific GPS coordinates. Does that mean anything to you?" He looked genuinely baffled. "Number 1, I don't. Why would I do that?" "We don't know, but we're going to check it out." I plugged the coordinates into my phone. They pointed to a location about 30 miles west of Albuquerque. Middle of nowhere, desert scrubland off Interstate 40 near the Laguna Pueblo Reservation. I called dispatch, asked for units to respond to that location, search for anything unusual, possible crime scene. Then Jenna and I kept Brett in the interview room, watching him. We gave him more water, some food from the vending machine. He picked at it, but didn't eat much, just sat there looking lost. 90 minutes later, my phone rang. It was one of the officers I'd sent to the coordinates. "Detective Sloan, you need to get out here now." "Why?" "What did you find?" "Bodies." We found bodies. The drive out to the site took 40 minutes. By the time we arrived, there were already 6 units on scene. Crime scene tape going up, forensics starting their preliminary work. The area was empty desert. No buildings, no roads except a dirt track that barely qualified. Just scrub brush and hard-packed earth and endless sky. The bodies were buried in a shallow grave. Not even that shallow. A couple feet down, maybe. Like whoever put them there wanted them found eventually. There were 5 of them. All in various stages of decomposition. The freshest, maybe a week old. The oldest, possibly several months. The officer who'd made the discovery, a young guy named Ruiz, walked me through it. We used ground-penetrating radar like you asked. Picked up the anomalies right away. Brought in a cadaver dog to confirm. Started digging and, well, you can see. IDS? Not yet. No wallets, no identification on any of them. We'll have to do this through dental records and DNA. But detective, there's something weird. What? He pointed to the positioning of the bodies. They're all arranged the same way. On their backs, arms at their sides, legs straight. Perfectly symmetrical. And look at this. He showed me close-up photos on his phone. Each victim had a mark on their forehead, a small puncture wound, precise, like it had been made with something very thin and sharp. All in the exact same spot, right between the eyes. I felt cold despite the afternoon heat. This wasn't random. This was methodical, ritualistic almost. Someone had killed these people, arranged them carefully, marked them, and buried them in a location that could be pinpointed by GPS coordinates. Coordinates that Brett Crosby had recited in a voice that wasn't his while asleep in an interview room. We processed the scene for hours. By the time we got back to the station, it was after 8 p.m. Brett was still in the interview room, now with his lawyer present. A public defender named Sharon Oates, who looked about as confused as everyone else. I sat down across from them. Brett, those coordinates you gave us. We found 5 bodies buried there, 5 people murdered and buried in the desert. His face went white. What? No, I didn't. I couldn't have. I didn't say you did, but you knew where they were. How did you know, Brett? I don't know. I don't remember saying anything about coordinates. Detective, Sharon cut in. Unless you're charging my client, we're done here. You've held him for almost 12 hours. Either charge him or release him. We need more time. The DNA from the blood on him is still processing, and we need to identify the victims. Until then, Brett stays. She wasn't happy about it, but there wasn't much she could do. We moved Brett to a holding cell for the night. Put him under watch. I wanted to see if he'd do it again. The sleeping thing. The voice. I went home around midnight. Got maybe 3 hours of sleep, and came back before dawn. Checked the observation logs from Brett's cell. The officer watching him reported that at 3:47 a.m., Brett had sat up in his bunk, eyes closed, and spoken in that same flat digital voice. More coordinates. 35.1091 north, 106.5714 west. I ran them immediately. Another location west of the city. This one even more remote. I sent units out at first light. They found 3 more bodies. Same arrangement, same puncture marks. Brett was brought back to the interview room. He looked like he hadn't slept at all, despite the officer's report that he'd been unconscious most of the night. His eyes were hollow, rimmed with red. Brett, it happened again. You gave more coordinates. We found 3 more people. He started crying. Silent tears running down his face. I don't understand what's happening to me. I don't understand any of this. Jenna leaned forward. Brett, is there anyone else who has access to your apartment? Anyone who could have been there last night? No, just me. Do you use any smart home devices? Speakers? Assistants? He nodded. Yeah, I have an Echo in my living room and bedroom. Use it for music mostly. Do you ever use it while you're sleeping? Like sleep timers or white noise? Sometimes. I have playlists I use to help me fall asleep. Can you give us access to your Amazon account? We need to see what you've been listening to. He agreed, gave us his login information. We pulled his listening history. For the past 3 months, every night around the time he said he went to bed, he'd been playing the same playlist. It was called Deep Sleep Frequencies. We downloaded it. The tracks were all ambient noise. Low hums, binaural beats, subliminal frequency stuff. Supposed to help with sleep and relaxation. I had our tech unit analyze the audio files. They came back 6 hours later with something that made my blood run cold. There's embedded data in the tracks. The tech, a guy named Leo Durant, said, hidden audio layered beneath the threshold of normal hearing. Subsonic. You can't hear it with your ears, but your brain processes it. What kind of data? Coordinates, times, instructions. It's like a code. Someone programmed these files to deliver information directly to the listener's subconscious. And there's more. What? Trigger phrases, commands. This file is designed to activate a specific behavioral response in someone who's been listening to it repeatedly under certain conditions, like sleep medication. Yeah, like Ambien. If someone's in a suggestible state, this audio could potentially make them do things they wouldn't normally do, things they wouldn't remember. We traced the playlist. It had been created by a user account that didn't exist anymore, deleted 3 months ago. But the tech guys managed to pull some metadata. The account had been accessed from multiple IP addresses, all of them using VPNs and proxies. Whoever created it knew how to cover their tracks. But why? Why target Brett? Why use him? We ran deeper background checks, looked into everything about his life, his job, his family, his online activity. That's when we found it. Brett worked for a cybersecurity firm that contracted with law enforcement agencies. Specifically, he'd worked on a project developing software for police databases, digital evidence management. He had clearance, access to sensitive information, case files, crime scene data, GPS locations of evidence. It clicked. Someone had targeted Brett specifically because of his access. They'd created the playlist, got him to use it, waited until he was vulnerable, and then used him as a conduit. The bodies we'd found, the locations, those were crimes that had been committed by someone else. But they'd used Brett as a way to communicate, to reveal the locations, maybe as a taunt, maybe as a confession. We brought in specialists, sleep disorder experts, audiologists, psychologists. Everyone agreed it was possible. Rare, but possible. With the right combination of medication, audio conditioning, and psychological manipulation, you could potentially program someone to act as a messenger without their conscious awareness. But we still didn't know who. Who was the actual killer? Who had created the audio files? Who had buried those 8 people? In the desert? Brett was cleared. Took 2 more days, but the DNA evidence proved he hadn't been at any of the crime scenes. The blood on him the morning he walked into the station came from a victim we identified as Margot Kendall, a 28-year-old woman who'd gone missing 6 months earlier. But Brett had never met her, had never been to the location where her body was buried. Somehow, some of her blood had been placed on him while he slept, probably taken from the crime scene and then transferred to him as part of whoever's sick game this was. The case is still open. We've identified all 8 victims. The FBI's involved now. They think it might be part of something bigger. A serial killer using technology to create false suspects, to muddy the waters, to play games with law enforcement. Brett's in protective custody. He's cooperating fully. Stopped using any smart devices. Stopped taking Ambien. Goes to therapy 3 times a week. He's traumatized. Can't shake the feeling that he did? Something terrible, even though we've proven he didn't. That's the cruelest part. Whoever did this didn't just kill those people. They tried to destroy Brett too. Use him as a weapon and a scapegoat. I still think about that voice, that flat digital tone coming from Brett's mouth while he slept, reciting coordinates with mechanical precision, like he was a device, a tool, a machine programmed by someone else. We've analyzed hundreds of audio files since then, checked other streaming playlists, found 3 more that had similar embedded data, all deleted before we could trace them. All listened to by people who later reported strange behavior, blackouts, lost time. We don't know how many others might be out there, how many people might be sleeping every night with voices they can't hear telling them things they won't remember. The investigation's ongoing. The FBI has a task force now. They're calling him the frequency killer, the person who uses sound to control and communicate and kill. We have theories, we have evidence, we have victims, but we don't have him. And until we do, I don't sleep well. Can't shake the feeling that maybe I've heard something too. Maybe we all have. Those videos we watch to fall asleep. Those podcasts we listen to in the dark. That white noise we play to drown out the silence. Who knows what's really in them? What messages are buried beneath the sounds we can hear? What instructions are being given while we're vulnerable and unaware? Brett asked me once. About a month after everything happened. He was sitting in a safe house, staring at nothing. Detective Sloan, do you think I'll ever feel safe again? I didn't know what to tell him. Still don't, because the truth is, I don't feel safe either. None of us do. We're all just one playlist away from becoming something we're not. One frequency away from losing ourselves. And somewhere out there, someone's listening, watching, waiting, programming the next messenger, the next coordinates. The next voice that speaks while we sleep. Story 3. I've been with Seattle PD for 19 years. Started as a patrol officer, worked my way up to detective, spent the last decade in major crimes. I've seen overdoses, murders staged to look like suicides, suicides staged to look like murders. You work homicide long enough, you think you've seen everything. You learn to trust evidence over intuition, facts over feelings. I was wrong about that. My name is Garrett Lund. This happened in November 2023, and I still don't have an explanation that makes sense. It started with a welfare check. That's how the weird ones always start. Someone misses work, doesn't answer their phone, and eventually somebody gets worried enough to call it in. In this case, it was the board of directors of a tech company called Nexus Systems. Their CEO, a guy named Travis Shea, hadn't shown up for a crucial investor meeting. Hadn't answered calls or emails for 36 hours. His assistant had gone to his apartment building, but security wouldn't let her up, without his permission, which they couldn't get. The company was valued at something like $800 million, and their CEO had just vanished. So they called us. I caught the call around 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. My partner, Owen Harlow, was out sick, so I took a uniform with me. Young guy named Max Sutton who'd been on the force maybe 3 years. Good kid, eager, did everything by the book. Travis Shea lived in the Cirrus Tower, one of those new luxury high-rises downtown. All glass and steel, the kind of place where a studio apartment costs more per month than most people make in a year. The building had security like a fortress. Keycard access, cameras everywhere, 24-hour concierge, the works. The building manager met us in the lobby. Her name was Iris Meadow, mid-40s, professional, clearly stressed. She'd been fielding calls from Shea's company all morning. "He's on the 40th floor," she said as we rode the elevator up. "Unit 4012. I checked our system. His keycard was last used at 6 p.m. Sunday evening when he entered the building. It hasn't been used since." "What about visitors?" I asked. "None logged, and all visitors have to be cleared through the desk. No one goes up without us calling the resident first." The elevator opened onto a quiet hallway. Thick carpet, recessed lighting, 4 units per floor, each one taking up a quarter of the building. We walked to 4012. The door was solid wood, high-end, with an electronic lock. I knocked. "Seattle Police, Travis Shea, are you in there?" Nothing. I knocked harder. "Mr. Shea, this is the police. We need to verify your welfare." Still nothing. Iris swiped her master keycard. The lock beeped red. She tried again. Same result. "That's strange," she said. "The master override should work on every unit." I looked at Sutton. "We're going to need to force entry." He nodded, already on his radio, calling for a battering ram. While we waited, I examined the door. No signs of damage, no scratches around the lock, nothing unusual. I put my ear to it, listening. The silence from inside was complete. 2 more officers arrived with the ram. It took 4 hits to break the door frame. The electronic lock gave way, but then we hit resistance. The door opened maybe 2 inches and stopped hard. "Chain lock," Sutton said. I could see it through the gap. A heavy brass security chain latched from the inside. "Mr. Shea," I called through the opening. "If you can hear me, we're coming in." No response. We had to cut the chain with bolt cutters. The whole time I kept thinking this was just going to be an embarrassing situation. Guy's asleep, takes sleeping pills maybe, doesn't hear us, and we're breaking down his door. He's going to be furious when he wakes up. But I was wrong. The door swung open and I immediately smelled it. Not decomposition, not yet, but something wrong. Chemical and copper, like old pennies and cleaning supplies mixed together. The apartment was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Minimalist furniture, everything clean and expensive and sterile. And, sitting in the middle of the living room, was Travis Shea. He was in a chair. A dining room chair, pulled out into the center of the room, facing the windows. His hands were behind him. His head was tilted forward. He wasn't moving. "Mr. Shea," I approached slowly. hand instinctively moving toward my weapon, even though I could already tell he wasn't a threat. I reached him and checked for a pulse. Nothing. His skin was cool, not quite cold, but getting there. Rigor mortis had started to set in. I estimated he'd been dead maybe 18 to 24 hours. Then I saw his hands. They were bound behind the chair, not with rope or zip ties or handcuffs, with wire, thin coated wire, wrapped in an intricate pattern around his wrists and through the chair slats. The knots were complex, precise, almost decorative. "Sutton," I said quietly. "Call it in. Suspicious death, possible, homicide." While he made the call, I did a walkthrough. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen, the living room. Every room was untouched. No signs of struggle, no signs of forced entry anywhere else. The windows were all sealed shut, the kind that don't open in high-rises. The balcony door was locked from the inside. I came back to the body. Travis Shea was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, barefoot, no visible wounds, no blood. His face was slack, eyes half open, expression empty. But his wrists, I could see now, had deep indentations from the wire, and his fingers showed ligature marks suggesting he'd been bound for a while before he died. The chair was positioned exactly in the center of the room. I could tell because the rug underneath it had indentations from the legs. It had been placed there deliberately, carefully. Forensics arrived within the hour. The medical examiner was a woman named Bria Snow, who I'd worked with dozens of times. She did her initial examination while crime scene techs photographed everything. "No obvious cause of death," she said, crouched beside the body. "No strangulation marks, no gunshot wounds, no stab wounds. I'll know more after the autopsy." "What about the bindings?" She examined his wrists carefully. "These knots are unusual, very unusual." "How so?" "They're nautical. Specifically, this looks like a combination of constrictor knots and bowline variations. Complex stuff. But the thing is," she paused, "there's no way he tied these himself." "You're sure?" "Positive. The angle, the tightness, the complexity. Plus, look at this." She pointed to his fingers. He struggled against them. You can see abrasions where he tried to free himself. If he'd tied them himself, he'd be able to release them. I felt that cold weight in my stomach that comes when a straightforward case turns into something else entirely. "So someone else was in here," Sutton said. "Had to be," I agreed. "But how did they get in? And how did they get out?" We spent the next 6 hours processing that apartment. We checked every inch. The door showed no signs of forced entry before we broke it. The chain lock could only be latched from inside. The windows were sealed and showed no tampering. The balcony door was locked from the inside with no damage. The building's security footage showed Travis Shea entering at 6 p.m. Sunday, alone. No one else entered or exited his unit. The hallway camera showed our arrival at 10 a.m. Tuesday. In between, nothing. The hallway was empty. "Maybe someone had a key," Sutton suggested. We checked. 3 key cards existed for the unit. Travis had one. Building management had a master, and there was a spare in the building security office that required 2 signatures to access. All 3 were accounted for. The logs showed no usage of any key except Travis's on Sunday evening. "Service entrance?" I asked Iris. "There isn't one for individual units. Service access is for common areas only, and those are all on camera too." I went back to the body. Travis Shea, bound to a chair in his own locked apartment, dead from unknown causes. And the only person who could have bound him was someone who somehow got in and out of a sealed room without using a door or window. The autopsy results came back 2 days later. Cause of death was determined to be acute heart failure. No drugs in his system, no poison, no physical trauma beyond the ligature marks. His heart had simply stopped. But healthy 42-year-old men don't just die of heart failure for no reason. Stress-induced cardiac arrest is possible, Bria told me. If he was terrified enough, if he believed he was going to die, the psychological trauma could trigger a heart attack. So someone scared him to death? Or he scared himself to death, but that doesn't explain the bindings. We interviewed everyone. His colleagues, his family, his ex-wife, his neighbors. No one had enemies. No one stood to gain from his death in any obvious way. His company was successful. His personal finances were clean. The only unusual thing was the apartment itself. Turns out Travis Shea had moved in just 3 months earlier. The unit had been empty for 2 years before that. The previous tenant was a woman named Blair House who'd broken her lease abruptly. Building management wouldn't say why, citing privacy concerns. But I pulled some strings. Blair House had left in the middle of the night, abandoned most of her belongings, and paid a substantial fee to break the lease immediately. When I tracked her down, she was living in Portland. She refused to talk on the phone, but eventually agreed to meet in person. I drove down there on a Saturday. She lived in a small apartment in a modest neighborhood, about as far from luxury high-rise living as you could get. She was in her 30s, thin, nervous. The kind of nervous that doesn't come from a single bad experience, but from something that's been eating at you for a long time. "I'm not going back there," she said before I even sat down. "I'm not asking you to. I just need to know what happened." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "You'll think I'm crazy. Try me. There was someone else in the apartment. Not a person. I don't know what it was, but it was there." "When did you first notice it?" "About 2 months after I moved in. Little things at first. Objects moved, doors opened that I knew I'd closed. But then I started seeing it, just glimpses, in mirrors and reflections in the windows. A figure, tall, wrong proportions. It was always behind me, but when I'd turn around, nothing was there." "Did you report this?" "To who?" "Building management thought I was hallucinating. I started sleeping with the lights on, started checking every room before I went to bed. And then one night I woke up and I couldn't move. I was in bed and I could feel something pressing down on my chest. I could see a shadow standing at the foot of my bed. I tried to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. It lasted maybe a minute, but it felt like hours. The next morning I packed a bag and left. I never went back." "Did you ever see anyone else? Anything that could explain it?" "No, but I'll tell you this. That building, that unit specifically, something's wrong with it. And if someone died there, I'm not surprised." I drove back to Seattle with more questions than answers. But one thing kept nagging at me. The wire used to bind Travis Shea. Forensics had identified it. It was fiber optic cable, the kind used in telecommunications infrastructure, and specifically the kind used in the Cirrus Tower's internal data network. I went back to the building with a warrant and building schematics. The apartment was on the 40th floor. According to the plans, a major fiber optic trunk line ran vertically through the building's core, passing behind the walls of Unit 4012. "Could someone access the apartment through the utility shafts?" I asked the building engineer, a guy named Kai Burke. He looked at the schematics. "Theoretically, maybe, but you'd need specialized access, and you'd have to know exactly where you were going. These shafts are narrow, dark, full of cables and conduit. It's not like crawling through air ducts in a movie." "Has anyone accessed them recently?" He checked his logs. "No service calls in that section for 6 months." But I couldn't let it go. I got permission to inspect the utility access near 4012. Kai led me through a maintenance door into a narrow shaft lined with cables and metal framework. We climbed down a ladder into darkness, flashlights cutting through dust and cobwebs. "There," Kai said, pointing. Behind a bundle of fiber optic cables, I could see something that didn't belong. Scratches in the metal framework, fresh ones, and caught on a sharp edge was a single thread, black fabric. We followed the shaft down. It twisted and turned, connecting different floors, different sections. And at the 35th floor, we found an access panel that had been forced open from the inside. The electronic lock had been bypassed, crudely but effectively. "This opens into the parking garage," Kai said, which meant whoever had accessed the utility shafts could have come and gone through the garage, which had dozens of blind spots in camera coverage. We pulled weeks of garage footage but found nothing conclusive. Too many vehicles, too many people, and no way to narrow it down. The case stayed open but went cold. No suspects, no clear motive, no way to explain how someone had gotten into a locked apartment to bind a man to a chair and apparently scare him to death without leaving any physical evidence beyond some scratches in a utility shaft and a piece of black fabric. I still think about it. Think about Travis Shea sitting in that chair, bound with cable pulled from the walls of his own building, watching something in front of him that scared him so badly his heart stopped. Think about what Blair House saw in the mirrors and reflections. Think about the impossibility of it all. 2 months after Travis's death, another welfare check was called in. Different building, different part of the city. A lawyer hadn't shown up for court. When officers forced entry to his apartment, they found him the same way. Sitting in a chair in the center of the room, hands bound behind him with fiber optic cable, dead from cardiac arrest. Door locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. No explanation. I'm not on that case. Different jurisdiction. But the detective called me when he heard about the similarities. We compared notes. The knots were identical. The positioning was identical. The locked room scenario was identical. "What do you think we're dealing with?" he asked me. I didn't have an answer then. I still don't. But I drive past the Cirrus Tower sometimes, look up at those dark windows on the 40th floor, and I wonder what's in there. What moves through the walls, through the cables, through the spaces we think are empty? What binds people to chairs and watches them until their hearts give out from fear? Unit 4, 012 is still vacant. Has been since we released the crime scene. Building management says they're renovating it, but the work never seems to start. The rent would be substantial if they could fill it. But they can't. Because some places remember what happened in them, and some things never really leave. I kept one piece of evidence. Not officially, just a photo on my phone. The knots binding Travis Shea's wrists. I showed it to a sailor once, a Navy guy who'd spent 20 years working with rope and cable. He looked at it for a long time. "I've seen these before," he said finally. "Submarine telecommunications work, deep sea cable laying. These knots are designed to hold under extreme pressure at depths where no human should be able to survive." I asked him where someone would learn knots like that. "No one learns them," he said. "Not anymore. The work's all done by machines now. Has been for 30 years. No human hands tie knots like this. Not in water that deep, not in darkness that complete. I still work major crimes, still investigate murders and suspicious deaths, still trust evidence over intuition. But I don't work locked room cases anymore. I pass them to other detectives, make excuses about caseload and time, because I know now that some rooms stay locked for a reason, some doors should stay closed, and some deaths can't be solved because the killer isn't something you can arrest or prosecute or even understand. I think about Travis Shea looking out those floor-to-ceiling windows at the Seattle skyline, while something behind him pulled cable from the walls and tied knots that shouldn't exist. I think about the moment he realized he couldn't get free, couldn't call for help, couldn't do anything but wait. I think about what he saw in the reflection of that glass, what watched him with patience that wasn't human, what came from darkness deeper than any ocean. And I think about the next call, because there will be a next call. Another apartment, another chair, another body bound with impossible knots, another room locked from the inside with no way in and no way out. I just hope I'm not the one who has to answer it. Story 4. There are some calls that stick with you, not because they're violent or bloody, but because they're wrong in a way you can't articulate, wrong in a way that makes you second-guess reality. My name is Nathan Caldwell, and I've been with the Detroit Police Department for 9 years, worked patrol in the 3rd Precinct, which covers some of the rougher neighborhoods, but also stretches into areas where foreclosures have turned entire blocks into ghost towns. Rows of Victorian houses built in the 20s and 30s, standing empty, windows boarded up, yards overgrown. Some get renovated eventually. Most just rot. It was March 2024. Late afternoon, maybe 4 p.m., when the call came through. Dispatch said a contractor working on a foreclosed property on Hillcrest Avenue reported a possible intruder. He'd heard voices inside the walls and refused to go back in until police cleared the building. My partner Rebecca Walsh and I took the call. Rebecca had been on the force about 5 years. Sharp, no nonsense. The kind of cop who didn't believe in things she couldn't explain. We drove out there expecting to find rats, or maybe a homeless person who'd broken in looking for shelter. The house was a 3-story Victorian painted dark blue with white trim. Or at least it had been once. Now the paint was peeling, revealing gray wood underneath. Most of the windows were intact, which was rare for an abandoned property in that neighborhood. The front yard was a mess of overgrown grass and dead bushes. A white pickup truck was parked in the driveway with the logo of some renovation company on the door. A man in his 40s was standing beside it, arms crossed, staring at the house like it might jump at him. He was pale, sweating despite the cool March air. "Afternoon," I said as we approached. "I'm Officer Caldwell. This is Officer Walsh. You called about an intruder?" The man nodded quickly. "Name's Vincent Perry. I'm with Restoration Dynamics. We bought this place at auction 3 weeks ago. Been doing assessment work, planning the renovation, and you heard voices?" "Yeah." His eyes flicked to the house, then back to us. "I was working upstairs in the master bedroom, 2nd floor, front of the house. I was taking measurements, checking the walls for structural damage, and I heard it. Whispering. Could have been wind," Rebecca suggested. "Old houses make noise. It wasn't wind." Vincent's voice was firm. "I know what wind sounds like." This was voices. Multiple voices, like people having a conversation, but I couldn't make out the words. It was coming from inside the wall. "Inside the wall," I repeated. "Yeah, the bedroom wall." I put my ear against it, and I could hear it clear as day. 2, maybe 3 people talking in low voices. I called out, asked if anyone was in there, and the voices stopped. Just stopped dead. And then after about 10 seconds, they started again. "Could be plumbing," Rebecca said. "Water in the pipes can sound like voices sometimes." Vincent shook his head. "I've been doing this for 15 years. I know the sounds houses make." This wasn't pipes. This was people. Rebecca and I exchanged a look. 9 times out of 10, these calls are nothing. A raccoon in the attic, wind through a broken window, the house settling, but there's always that one time. "All right," I said. "We'll check it out. You stay here." Vincent handed me a key. Front door's unlocked anyway. The lock's broken. I jimmied it open this morning. We approached the house, hands resting on our service weapons out of habit. The front porch creaked under our weight. The door opened with a long, drawn-out squeal. Inside, the air was stale and thick with dust. The entry hall was wide, with a staircase leading up to the 2nd floor and doorways branching off to what looked like a living room and dining room. The walls were covered in old floral wallpaper, yellowed and peeling. The floor was hardwood, scuffed and stained. "Detroit PD," I called out. "If anyone's in here, make yourself known." Silence. We cleared the 1st floor room by room. Living room, dining room, kitchen, a small bathroom. Everything was empty. No furniture, no signs of recent occupation. Just dust and cobwebs and the smell of decay. We headed upstairs. The staircase groaned with every step. At the top was a hallway with 4 doors. 3 were open, revealing empty bedrooms and another bathroom. The 4th door, at the front of the house, was closed. "Master bedroom," Rebecca said quietly. I approached, tried the handle. It turned easily. The door swung open. The room was large, maybe 15 by 20 feet, with 2 tall windows facing the street. The walls were painted a faded cream color. An old chandelier hung from the ceiling, dusty and cobwebbed. The floor was the same hardwood as downstairs, and on the far wall there was a painting. It was the only thing in the room. A large oil painting in an ornate gold frame, hanging perfectly centered. It showed a garden scene, flowers and trees, nothing remarkable. But it was pristine. No dust, no damage, like someone had just hung it yesterday. That's weird, Rebecca said, walking over to it. I was about to agree when I heard it, faint but distinct. Whispering. You hear that? I asked. Rebecca froze. Yeah. The sound was coming from the wall behind the painting. Multiple voices, overlapping. Too low to make out individual words, but clearly human. Clearly conversational. I approached slowly, pulled out my flashlight, and examined the wall around the painting. That's when I saw it. A small hole, maybe half an inch in diameter, drilled through the wall just above the frame's edge. It was perfectly round, deliberately cut, and when I looked closer I could see it went all the way through the drywall. There's a peephole, I said. The whispering continued, steady and rhythmic, like people having a normal conversation just on the other side of the wall. Rebecca keyed her radio. Dispatch, we're at the Hillcrest location. We've got an unusual situation here. Possible. Concealed individuals inside a wall cavity. Request additional units and maybe a structural specialist. Copy that. Additional units en route. I moved closer to the hole, tried to see through it, but it was too small and dark inside. The whispering didn't change in volume or tone. It just continued, constant and unnerving. Rebecca was examining the wall, running her hands along the surface. This section sounds hollow, she said, knocking gently. Different from the rest. I knocked too. She was right. The wall had a hollow, drum-like quality, like there was empty space behind it instead of studs and insulation. Backup arrived 15 minutes later. 2 more patrol units and a sergeant named Douglas Fraser. He was a 20-year veteran, seen everything Detroit had to offer. He listened to our report, listened to the whispering, and made a decision. We're opening it up, he said. Get the contractor back in here with tools. Vincent Perry was reluctant but came back inside with a crowbar and a hammer. He positioned himself at the edge of the suspicious section of wall, near a seam where the drywall met the corner. On 3, Douglas said. 1, 2, 3. Vincent swung the crowbar, punching through the drywall with a crunch. A cloud of dust and old plaster billowed out. The whispering stopped immediately. Vincent pulled back a section of drywall, revealing the dark cavity inside. I shined my flashlight into the gap, and I saw it. A face. Pale, smooth, staring directly at me. I jerked back, hand going to my weapon, but Rebecca grabbed my arm. Wait, she said. Look. I looked again, forcing myself to focus. The face wasn't moving. It wasn't breathing. It was a mannequin. Pull down more, Douglas ordered. Vincent ripped away another section of drywall. More of the cavity was revealed, and I felt my stomach drop. There were 3 mannequins inside the wall. 3 full-sized mannequins dressed in clothes, positioned as if sitting at a table. There was no table, of course, just the mannequins posed in midair, held in place by a wooden framework built into the wall cavity. The first mannequin was a woman's form wearing a floral dress from maybe the 80s or 90s. Her head was turned to face us, the blank eyes staring. The second was a man's form in a collared shirt and slacks, also facing us. The third was smaller, child-sized, wearing a striped shirt, head turned the same way. They were arranged like they'd been having tea or a meal, hands positioned as if holding invisible cups and plates. All 3 heads turned toward the opening we'd made, toward us. What the hell? One of the other officers breathed. Douglas stepped closer, examining the setup. This is deliberate. Someone built this. Someone put them here. The whispering was gone. The room was silent except for our breathing and the distant sound of traffic outside. But there's no way mannequins were making those sounds, Rebecca said. That was voices. We all heard voices. Check the rest of the cavity, Douglas said. Vincent pulled down more drywall, exposing the full interior. The wooden framework was elaborate, carefully constructed to hold the mannequins in position. Behind them, mounted to the back wall of the cavity, was an old baby monitor. The kind with a microphone and speaker, probably from the 90s based on the design. There's a monitor, I said, pointing. Douglas reached in carefully and pulled it out. It was dusty, but the power light was on, glowing a faint red. "It's active," he said. "Where's it broadcasting from?" We searched the room, checked for the receiving unit, found nothing. Then Rebecca looked up at the ceiling. "The attic," she said. "If there's another unit up there, it could be picking up sounds and broadcasting them down." "How do we get to the attic?" Douglas asked. Vincent led us back to the hallway. "There's a pull-down ladder in the hall ceiling." He pulled the cord. A folding ladder descended with a screech of old springs. Douglas went up first, flashlight in hand, then me, then Rebecca. The attic was low-ceilinged and cramped, filled with exposed beams and loose insulation. It smelled of old wood and mildew, and it was empty. No furniture, no boxes, no second baby monitor. "Nothing up here?" Douglas called down. "But there has to be," Rebecca said. "Where else would it be broadcasting from?" We searched every corner, every shadow. Found nothing, just empty space and decades of dust. Then I noticed something. In the dust on the attic floor, near the access opening, there were footprints. Fresh footprints. The dust was disturbed in a clear path leading from the ladder to the far corner and back. "Someone's been up here," I said. We followed the prints. They led to the corner where the attic space ended at a low wall. There, sitting on one of the exposed beams, was another baby monitor. The receiving unit. Douglas picked it up. The power light was on. He pressed the talk button experimentally, and his voice echoed from the unit downstairs in the bedroom, proving the connection. "But it was transmitting voices before," Rebecca said. "Where from?" That's when I heard my own breathing. Not from me, but from the monitor in Douglas's hand. My breathing, my exact breathing, coming out of the speaker. But it wasn't synchronized. It was playing back on a delay. About 10 seconds behind, I held my breath to test it. 10 seconds later, the breathing sounds from the monitor stopped. "It's recording us," I said, playing it back. "But we just got here," Rebecca said. "What was it playing before?" We stood there in the dim attic, the reality settling over us. The monitor had been recording and playing back sounds, but the voices we'd heard, the whispering, that had been going on before we arrived. Before anyone had been in that room in weeks, maybe months. Douglas looked at the device in his hand, then at me. "Let's get out of this attic." We climbed back down. The other officers were still in the bedroom, staring at the mannequins in the wall. Vincent had removed more drywall, fully exposing the cavity now. The mannequins looked even more unsettling in full view. Their posed positions, their turned heads, their blank staring faces. "We need to document all this," Douglas said. "Photos, measurements, everything, and I want the mannequins removed. Get them out of the wall and into evidence." It took another hour to carefully extract the mannequins. They were secured to the framework with bolts and wire. Each one was old, probably vintage department store models from the 70s or 80s. The clothing was period-accurate too, worn and dusty. As we were loading the last mannequin into an evidence bag, one of the officers found something else in the wall cavity. A small notebook, wedged behind where the child mannequin had been positioned. He handed it to Douglas, who flipped through it. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, dates, times, and short entries. March 3rd, 1987, 11:30 p.m. They're talking again. Can hear them clearly tonight. March 15th, 1987, 2:15 a.m. Woke to their voices. Moved the child closer. They quieted down. April 2nd, 1987, 9 p.m. Built the framework today. They need to be hidden. They need to watch. The entries went on for pages, spanning several months in 1987. The handwriting became more erratic toward the end, harder to read. The final entry was dated June 18th, 1987. They're watching me now. I can feel it. I did what they asked. I put them where they can see. But now they won't stop watching. Douglas closed the notebook. We need to find out who owned this house in 1987. The research took a few days. The house had been owned by a woman named Marjorie Brennan from 1985 to 1988. She'd lived there alone after her husband and daughter died in a car accident in 1986. According to the records, she'd been found dead in the house in June 1988. Cause of death listed as natural causes, heart failure. She was 54. But there was a police report from a welfare check in June 1987, the same month as that last notebook entry. Neighbors had called, concerned because they hadn't seen her in weeks. Officers had responded, found her alive but incoherent, talking about voices in the walls and people watching her. She'd been taken to a hospital for psychiatric evaluation, held for 72 hours, then released. After that, she'd lived in the house for another year before her death. And in that time, she'd sealed 3 mannequins inside her bedroom wall, dressed them in her family's clothes, positioned them facing outward, and set up a baby monitor system that somehow, impossibly, had continued to broadcast sounds for nearly 40 years. The monitor was sent to a tech lab for analysis. The report came back stating it was a standard 1990s-era baby monitor, but the broadcast mechanism had been modified. Someone had wired it to a loop recording device, a small cassette tape player hidden inside the casing. The tape contained about 20 minutes of recorded conversation, voices of a man, a woman, and a child, talking about everyday things: dinner, school, work, normal family conversation. The tape had been set to play on a loop continuously whenever the monitor detected silence in the room. When it heard sounds, it would record them for 10 seconds, then play them back on a delay. Marjorie Brennan had recorded her family's voices, probably from before they died, and set up a system to play them back from inside the wall, from behind the mannequins dressed in their clothes, positioned as if they were still alive, still together, still watching over her. The house was eventually renovated and sold. Vincent's company finished the job, though he told me later he'd never worked a more uncomfortable project. He said even after the wall was repaired and repainted, even after all traces of what had been there were gone, he could still feel it, that sense of being watched. I still drive past that house sometimes. It's occupied now. A young family bought it last year. They don't know the history, don't know what was hidden in their bedroom wall, don't know about Marjorie Brennan or her desperate attempt to keep her family close, even after death. But sometimes at night, when I'm on patrol and I pass by, I see the light on in that upstairs bedroom, and I wonder if they hear it too. The whispering, the voices of people who aren't there anymore, playing on a loop, recorded decades ago but still somehow present, still somehow watching from behind walls that remember what they've hidden. I kept a copy of that notebook, read through it sometimes when I'm trying to make sense of things that don't make sense. The pain in those entries, the desperation, the slow descent into whatever drove Marjorie to seal mannequins dressed as her family inside her bedroom wall. People ask me sometimes what the weirdest call I've ever responded to was. I tell them about the mannequins, about the voices in the wall, about the monitor that recorded and played back sounds on a delay. But I don't tell them the part that really bothers me. When we were removing the last mannequin, the child-sized one, I noticed something on its hand. A small smudge of what looked like fresh dust. I touched it without thinking, and it came off on my finger. But here's the thing. The dust inside that wall cavity was old, settled, undisturbed for decades. This dust was fresh, new, like something had touched that mannequin recently. Like something had been in that sealed wall cavity, moving around, leaving traces. The baby monitor had been recording for 40 years. Recording the empty room, the silence, the nothing. And sometimes, very rarely, when there was sound, it would play it back. But what had it been recording before we got there? What sounds had filled that empty house, that sealed wall cavity, that room where a woman had died trying to keep her dead family alive? I don't know, and I don't want to know, because some questions don't have answers you want to hear. Some walls are better left sealed, and some voices that whisper in the dark are better left unheard. Story 5. I never thought paperwork would be the thing that haunted me. Not the crashes, not the fatalities, not the high-speed chases. Paperwork. My name is Harris Thornton. I've been with the Nevada Highway Patrol for 16 years. Used to work the open road. US 95 between Las Vegas and Tonopah. 300 miles of desert, mining towns and tourists who don't understand what 110 degrees does to a radiator. I was good at it. Made sergeant at 32, had commendations, had a future. Then I had a pursuit that ended with a minivan wrapped around a power pole and a mother of 3 dead because I made a call I can't take back. The review board cleared me. Said I followed protocol. But protocol doesn't make you sleep better. So I took the reassignment. Title and registration desk at the DMV liaison office in Carson City. A basement office with fluorescent lights that hum and a computer that runs slower than evolution. Most days I process salvage titles. Cars totaled, in accidents, rebuilt by shade tree mechanics, brought back to legal status through a mountain of paperwork. It's mind-numbing work. Forms in triplicate, VIN verification photos, inspection certificates from licensed mechanics. Every vehicle has a story, but after a few thousand, they all blur together. Until they don't. It was March of 2023 when I first noticed the pattern. I'd been at the desk for 8 months, processing maybe 50 salvage titles a week. I was reviewing a batch from the previous quarter, running random audits like we're supposed to, when something caught my eye. A 1998 Winnebago Brave motorhome. Reported stolen from a Las Vegas RV park in 2019. Recovered as salvage in 2020. But then in 2021, it was re-registered. Clean title. New owner. The paperwork was perfect. Too perfect. The VIN matched. The inspection was signed by a licensed mechanic named Vincent Porter. The fees were paid in full. The address for the new owner was listed as a set of GPS coordinates. That's not unusual out here. Lots of people live off-grid in Nevada. BLM land, mining claims, places without street addresses. You use coordinates because there's no other way to describe where you are. But I pulled up the location on the map out of curiosity. It was in the middle of nowhere, about 40 miles west of Tonopah, right in the heart of the Big Smoky Valley. No roads leading to it on the satellite view, no structures visible, just flat alkali desert. I almost let it go. Almost. But something made me run the mechanic's name through the system. Vincent Porter. Licensed in Nevada since 1987. Address in Goldfield. I'd driven through Goldfield 100 times. It's barely a town anymore. Maybe 200 people on a good day. Half the buildings are abandoned. Then I ran another search. How many vehicles had Vincent Porter inspected for salvage re-registration in the last 5 years? The computer took a long time to load the results. When it finally did, I stared at the number. 47. 47 vehicles, all originally reported stolen from Las Vegas, all recovered as salvage, all re-registered with perfect paperwork, all with the same GPS coordinates as the owner address, all inspected by the same mechanic. I printed the list. Motorhomes, school buses, box trucks, tanker trucks, cargo vans, big vehicles, the kind you could live in or use for storage or convert into something else. I should have reported it up the chain. Should have sent it to the theft division or the fraud unit. But I didn't. Because after 8 months of pushing paper, I finally had something that felt like real police work. I drove out to Goldfield on my day off. It's about an hour and a half from Carson City if you push it. The town looks like a movie set. Old wooden buildings, some restored for tourists, most just left to rot. I found the address listed for Vincent Porter. It was a single-wide trailer on the edge of town, set back from the highway behind a chain-link fence. The gate was open. I pulled in, knocked on the door. No answer. I walked around back and found the mechanic's bay. Just a concrete pad with a metal roof and 3 walls. No vehicles inside, but the tools were there. Lift equipment, welding rigs, everything you'd need to rebuild a salvage vehicle, and something else. Stacked against the back wall were metal plates, VIN plates, dozens of them. cut from vehicle frames, each one stamped with a unique identification number. I took photos with my phone, backed out slowly, got in my truck and sat there trying to make sense of it. VIN plates are like fingerprints for vehicles. You can't just swap them. Well, you can, but it's a federal crime. And if you're good enough, if you cut the original VIN from a stolen vehicle and weld it onto a junked frame, you can create a Frankenstein, a stolen vehicle with a legal identity. I called it into the fraud division, gave them everything I had. They thanked me, took the information, and told me they'd look into it. 2 weeks later, I got a call back. They'd visited the Goldfield address. Vincent Porter was gone. The trailer was empty. The mechanic's bay was cleared out. No VIN plates, no tools, nothing. They ran his license. It was real. But the address he'd used to get it in 1987 no longer existed. They couldn't find any Vincent Porter in their databases who matched. It was like he'd been real just long enough to sign 47 inspection forms, and then vanished. I couldn't let it go. Started spending my lunch breaks pulling up the files on those 47 vehicles, reading every form, looking for anything that didn't fit. That's when I found the contracts. 6 of the re-registered vehicles had insurance claims attached, not collision claims, towing claims, the kind you file when your car breaks down in the middle of nowhere and you get hit with an enormous bill. I pulled the claim files. All 6 were from families traveling on US 95. All 6 had breakdowns in the same stretch of highway, mile marker 83 to mile marker 92, right in the dead zone between Tonopah and Goldfield where cell service drops out. The claims showed tow bills ranging from $45,000 to $70,000. Not for the tow itself, for storage, for salvage liens, for processing fees, the kind of predatory billing that bankruptcy lawyers salivate over. But here's the thing. All 6 families had signed contracts, legal contracts agreeing to the fees, and when they couldn't pay, the towing company had filed liens, not on the vehicles, on the passengers. I read that part 3 times to make sure I wasn't seeing things. Liens on human beings, filed under some twisted interpretation of maritime salvage law. The contracts claimed that by accepting the tow to what they called sanctuary, the passengers had agreed that if they defaulted on payment, they could be held as collateral labor until the debt was satisfied. It was insane. It was illegal, but it was filed in civil court, not criminal. And according to the notes, the cases had been dismissed because the families never showed up to contest them. I found contact information for one of the families, the Garrison family. Husband, wife, 2 kids. Their RV had broken down in July of 2018. They'd been towed to sanctuary. According to the insurance claim, they'd escaped 3 days later and driven straight to Las Vegas. They'd reported the incident to Metro PD, but the responding officer had noted it as a civil dispute. Recommended they contact a lawyer. I called the number listed for Mitchell Garrison. It was disconnected. I ran his name through every database I had access to. Nothing. No current address, no employment records, no social media. It was like the whole family had disappeared. I tried 2 more families from the claims. Same result. Disconnected numbers. No current records. Gone. That night I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about those GPS coordinates. About 47 stolen vehicles. Re-registered to the same location. About families who'd been towed to sanctuary and then vanished. The next morning I called in sick. Loaded my truck with water, a full tank of gas, and my service weapon. I told my wife I was going hiking. Didn't mention where. The drive from Carson City to the coordinates took 4 hours. I stayed on paved roads as long as I could, then turned onto a dirt track that didn't show up on any map. The truck handled it fine for the first 10 miles. Then the track got rougher, washboard ruts that rattled my teeth. I kept going. Around noon I saw it. Not a town, not even close. From a distance it looked like a junkyard, but as I got closer I realized it was something else entirely. It was a fortress made of vehicles, motorhomes, buses, shipping containers, all welded together in a massive spiral formation. The outer ring was maybe a quarter-mile across. The walls were patchwork metal, windows welded shut or covered with steel plates, gaps filled with sheet, metal and wire mesh. It looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. I stopped the truck about half a mile out. Got my binoculars. Scanned the structure. There were people inside. I could see them moving between the vehicles. They weren't walking normally. They were shuffling, heads down, wearing something over their faces. Welding masks. Every single person I could see was wearing a welding mask. And they were working. Cutting metal, welding seams, dismantling vehicles piece by piece. A never-ending construction project, or maybe deconstruction. Hard to tell which. I drove closer. No one tried to stop me. The entrance to the spiral was wide open. A gap between two school buses, both painted white, both covered in writing. Legal text, tiny handwritten paragraphs covering every inch of metal. I pulled through the gap and into the spiral. The interior was a maze. Narrow passages between welded vehicles, everything covered in that same handwritten legal text. I drove slowly, following the curve of the spiral inward. The people didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my truck, just kept working. Welding masks locked onto their heads with padlocks. The masks weren't just sitting on their faces. They were secured, bolted into place. I stopped the truck, got out, approached one of the workers. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Vincent Porter." The worker didn't respond, didn't even turn toward me, just kept cutting metal with an angle grinder, sparks showering onto the ground. I reached out, touched his shoulder. The worker flinched but didn't stop, didn't speak. I walked around to see the front of the mask. Through the dark welding glass, I could see eyes, terrified eyes. "Hey, can you hear me? I'm Nevada Highway Patrol. Are you being held here against your will?" Nothing. The worker just kept cutting. I heard an engine behind me, turned to see a pickup truck approaching. It stopped 20 feet away and 3 men got out. They weren't wearing welding masks. They were wearing armor made from license plates. Actual license plates, hundreds of them, riveted together into crude chest plates and shin guards. They carried batons made from tire irons. The one in front stepped toward me. "You're trespassing on sovereign territory. I'm Nevada Highway Patrol. I'm investigating reports of stolen vehicles. No vehicles here are stolen, all legally registered. All inspections performed by licensed mechanics, all fees paid. Who are you?" "I am a bailiff of the Rust Court. You need to leave." "I'm not leaving until I speak to whoever's in charge here." The bailiff smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Father Vincent doesn't typically see visitors, but for an officer of the corporate state, I think he'll make an exception. They escorted me deeper into the spiral. The passages got narrower. The walls got higher. The legal text got more dense. I tried to read some of it as we walked. It was gibberish. Pseudo-legal language mixing maritime law, sovereign, citizen ideology, and what looked like religious text. At the center of the spiral was a clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a structure made from car seats. Hundreds of them, stacked and bolted together into a throne. And sitting on that throne was Father Vincent. He wasn't what I expected. Not some wild-eyed cult leader. He was maybe 60, wearing reading glasses and a cardigan. He looked like someone's grandfather. He was reading a book. He set it down as I approached. "Officer Thornton, I've been expecting someone like you for quite some time." "How do you know my name?" "Because I've read your file. I've read everyone's file. I am the keeper of records for the Rust Court. All debts are recorded. All liens are filed. All contracts are binding." He gestured to a shipping container beside the throne. The doors were open. Inside were filing cabinets. Thousands of them. "Would you like to see your debt?" "I don't have a debt to you." "Oh, but you do." Every citizen of the corporate state carries debt. Debt to society. Debt to the system. You, specifically, carry the debt of a life taken. Mrs. Victoria Rhodes, age 37, mother of 3, died because you made an error in judgment. My blood went cold. "How do you know that?" "Public records. It's all public records. The pursuit report, the investigation, the settlement her family received, $2.3 million paid by the state of Nevada. That's your debt, Officer Thornton. You owe $2.3 million to the cosmic balance sheet." That's not how this works. Isn't it? You took a life. Someone has to pay. The state paid in currency, but currency is a fiction. The only real payment is labor, equivalent labor. Mrs. Rhodes's remaining years. Perhaps 30, 35 if she'd been healthy. That's how much labor you owe. You're insane. Father Vincent shook his head sadly. No, I'm the only sane one here. I simply make explicit what society keeps implicit. Debt is control, always has been. These people, he gestured to the workers shuffling past. They understand now. They signed contracts. They accepted help. They ate food and drank water and slept under shelter. They incurred debt. Now they pay. It's honest. It's fair. It's binding. This is kidnapping. This is slavery. No, this is bankruptcy court. I am a licensed mediator of civil debt resolution. Everything here is legal. Every person signed a contract. Every contract has been filed with the appropriate authorities. You can check. Those masks, the padlocks, that's not legal. The masks are safety equipment. OSHA compliant. The locks are to prevent removal during work shifts, liability protection, all explained in the contracts. I pulled my weapon. I'm placing you under arrest. The bailiffs moved in, but Father Vincent raised a hand. Officer Thornton, you point that weapon at me and you will have committed assault on sovereign territory. You will be in breach of peace. You will incur a debt to this court, and we will file a lien. On you. I'll take my chances. Will you? Look behind you. I turned. The passage I'd walked through was filled with workers. Dozens of them. All wearing those locked masks. All holding tools, angle grinders, welding torches, tire irons. They won't hurt you, Father Vincent said calmly. They can't. They're bound by their contracts to defensive action only. But they will detain you. And once you're detained, you'll need representation, legal representation. And that will cost money, money you don't have. So you'll sign a contract, and then you'll join them. I lowered the weapon. Not because I was afraid, because he was right. I was alone. No backup, no warrant, no jurisdiction. I was trespassing on private property, pointing a gun at a civilian. Even if I arrested him, any prosecutor would laugh me out of the office. Let me take one person, I said. Just one. Prove they're here against their will. Father Vincent considered this. You may take one. Choose. I looked at the workers, tried to see their faces through the dark glass, tried to find someone who looked like they wanted out. Then I saw her, smaller than the others, young, maybe 20. She was welding a seam on a cargo container, but her hands were shaking. Her, Father Vincent nodded. Elena Walsh, accepted our tow service in June of 2022. Contract specifies $72,000 in fees. She has paid back $41,000 in labor equivalents. Remaining balance, $31,000. If you wish to assume her debt, she may go. I'm not paying you a damn thing. Then she stays. I walked over to the girl, Elena. Do you want to leave? She nodded frantically. Did you sign a contract? She nodded again. Did anyone force you to sign? She shook her head. That was the nightmare of it. No force, no gun to the head, just predatory contracts and civil law twisted into a cage. I turned back to Father Vincent. I'll be back, with a warrant, with backup, and I'll shut this place down. You're welcome to try, but you'll find everything is in order. Every I dotted, every T crossed. This isn't a criminal matter, Officer Thornton. It's a civil one. And civil matters take time, years usually. How many more people will sign our contracts while you wait for the courts? I left, drove out of that spiral maze feeling like I'd stepped into another dimension. Went straight to the nearest sheriff's station, filed a report, described everything. They listened, took notes, sent a deputy out to investigate the next day. The deputy came back with photos. The structure was there, the vehicles were there, but the people were gone. All the workers, all the bailiffs, Father Vincent, all gone. The deputy walked the entire spiral, found the throne made of car seats, found the shipping container full of filing cabinets. But the filing cabinets were empty. I went back myself 3 days later. Same thing, structure intact, people gone, like they'd just evacuated. But on the seat of my truck, someone had left something. A file folder. Inside was a contract. Blank. Ready to be signed. And a note in precise handwriting. You can't arrest debt. You can't imprison obligation. The Rust Court will reconvene when the next debtor arrives. Perhaps sooner. Perhaps you'll need a tow someday, Officer Thornton. Everyone breaks down eventually. I checked the missing persons reports. Filed reports for the families from the insurance claims. The Garrisons, the others. All officially missing. But no bodies, no evidence of foul play. Just people who accepted help and disappeared. 2 months later, I heard about a traffic incident on US 95. A family broken down at mile marker 87. A tow truck arrived. Offered to take them to safety. They signed something, and they drove off. When Highway Patrol responded an hour later, the family's vehicle was still there. Empty. Keys in the ignition. I tried to track the tow truck. No company name, no plates visible on the witness descriptions. Just a white truck that appeared when people needed it most. Last month I got a medical report. Came across my desk as part of a salvage title investigation. A young woman found walking on Highway 95, dehydrated, confused, wearing a welding mask that wouldn't come off. They had to cut it off at the hospital. When they did, they found scar tissue. The mask had been on her face so long the skin had started to grow around it. The metal had caused chemical burns, heavy metal poisoning, lead, mercury, cadmium, but also something else the toxicology report couldn't identify. Some kind of particulate embedded in her skin, like metal dust had been absorbed into her tissue. Her name was Elena Walsh. She wouldn't speak, couldn't speak. When doctors examined her vocal cords, they found scar tissue there too, like she'd been breathing metal dust for months. She's in a care facility now, recovering physically, but mentally, she's somewhere else. She sits in her room and writes. Page after page of legal text, contracts, liens, debt instruments, all in perfect legalese, all completely binding, all absolutely insane. I visited her once, asked if she remembered me, asked if she remembered Father Vincent. She looked at me with empty eyes and said one thing, "The iron enters you so you can never leave." I still work the title and registration desk, still process salvage forms. But now I check every vehicle inspected by mechanics I don't recognize. Check every address that's just coordinates. Check every contract that seems too good, too perfect, too binding. Because the Rust Court is still out there. Still filing paperwork. Still signing contracts. Still welding people into a city made of stolen metal and civil law and debt that can never be fully paid. And sometimes late at night, I get mail. A summons. Printed on official-looking paper, ordering me to appear before the Rust Court to answer for my debt. The debt of Victoria Rhodes. 35 years of labor, starting on the date of my death. I don't know if it's legally binding. I don't know if Father Vincent is even real or just a ghost made of loopholes and fine print. But I know this. Everyone breaks down eventually. Everyone needs help sometime. And when you do, when you're stranded in the desert with no cell service and no options, and a white tow truck appears with a friendly driver and a simple contract, remember this. Read the fine print. All of it. Because some debts don't end when you drive away. Some debts follow you. Some debts are paid in iron and blood and years you'll never get back. And some debts are collected in a city of rust where the paperwork is always, always perfect.